So at the marquee here, one night we're doing church upstairs, and downstairs we're shooting a porno.
Really what we do here is all volunteer based, so anybody who does anything with the cafe is doing it out of their own heart, out of their own choice. No one, from myself to someone who does dishes to a band, is ever paid.
That's big for us. Yeah, we didn't want to be a reaction at all. We didn't want to be doing this despite what everybody else has been doing, or saying that all the stuff that goes on Sunday morning doesn't work.
We're desperately trying to respond to our neighborhood, to our postal code. We're desperately just trying to be part of our neighborhood and build relationship with people as much as we can, so that we can both incarnate and communicate the gospel in this place, in this specific time, being authentic to who we are as people.
What is God doing on the fringes of Canadian culture? Behind the scenes, an unexpected undercurrent of men and women have emerged to form new communities intent on incarnating the message of Jesus where they live and in their own words. Though rooted in orthodoxy, these fresh expressions are evolving in nature, adapting to their unique contexts, neighborhoods, and establishing kingdom outposts in the margins of society. Nonetheless, they have often been misunderstood as mere reactions or rebellion, indicted of being unable to conform to past systems. A closer look, however, will reveal that while distinct from their forerunners, these new endeavors continue to embody the mission of the church and ultimately show that it's not a one-size-fits-all.
You know, I used to say we started it because I wanted a place for my friends who were like me to come and hang out, but the reality is I wanted to be in a faith community that really figured out what it meant to follow Jesus rather than just go to church and do church. The theater's it's a pretty natural place to begin relationships. So the gig is about building relationship with the arts community as a community of faith. Yeah, we're sitting in this big old echoey room. That's why it sounds funny. This is actually our loading dock for our theater. The church, we have this faith community side. We own and operate a theater. And so our gig is to serve gigging musicians and artists, provide them a great place to play, treat them well, give them a loading dock so they can drive in here, take all the gear in, and so that's what pays the bills of our church plant. So we're about serving the artistic community, partnering with what exists outside of the church, which you take heat for, right? Like we take heat for that because the established community has said to us at times, you're too far into the world. But at the end of the day, we think that God's called us to be totally immersed in a culture. So it's part of the story, man.
What if contextualizing the good news of Jesus has mistakenly become about making faith fashionable to the masses? Perhaps reducing the message of hope and redemption to the lowest common denominator in an effort to reach the broadest audience possible has cornered the church into compromise. If the local church is to truly speak into her context, no longer can she rest on her laurels, relying on the blood, sweat, and tears of past expressions to fulfill her mission today. For too long, the church has lazily been answering questions that no one is asking, focusing on managing and maintaining her structures instead of facing into the empire in which she now finds herself. Intensely contextual, these new and evolving expressions of church in Canada actively have a pulse on their neighborhoods, Developing an intimate understanding of their context has not only helped shape their ecclesiology, but has also empowered them to live faithfully within it.
So our approach is actually kind of the antithesis of performance. It would be odd to try to videotape us, because you wouldn't know where to point the camera.
And I tried to unlearn some of the stuff I'd learned about church planning, like you come with a big vision and kind of core values, and you come with all this thought out and look for people to fill in your slots. Well, I just tried to forget that, and I came at it more as a, like this is a jam session. I'm a musician. All I'm coming with is like some chords and a melody, and I actually need some other creative people to help make this come alive. So I need a drummer, I need a bassist, and people who can bring their own creativity to it. So that's kind of how we started.
And this room itself was where we originally started to do church and be the church. So we met as a small group in here. We would pray. We'd have 24-hour prayer sessions in here, again seeking God and experimenting. We called it in the early days the worship experiment, and we just did all kinds of wild and crazy things where we'd have giant canvases on the floor and we'd all be painting, even the little kids, the babies, the 3-year-olds would be walking around with their hands and knees in the paint, and we would stand back and we would watch the kid paint and we would say, okay, God, what are you trying to tell us through that kid? And I know that sounds kind of strange, but even as I say that, I'm thinking, those are some of the really amazing memories I have of the beginnings of Ecclesiacs. And as we refined the experiment and as some beautiful stuff bubbled out of that, I just had a real sense that that is what is supposed to inform what we do when we finally open the doors and say, hey, come on in, we're ready to receive whoever into community.
Next, just planted a church. And so part of what's coming down the pipe is for us to continue to collect ourselves and to be the church right here on 89 Colburn Street. That's something that's always front and center, that we want this neighborhood to care that we're here, and that if we burn down, it would actually matter to them. And slowly and surely that happens. But we have bigger dreams for Kingston. Part of this planting of Russell Church was that we've got a lot of low-income housing in our north end, and we wanted to chase poverty as far as we could north and be right there in that scene, in that environment, helping people with very real needs. And then in the back of our minds, we've always had this idea of triangulating Kingston, that out to the west end is loads of suburbs, and we know that the same problems exist out there as anywhere else. It's just that there's money to hide them. So we'd love to do something next-ish, out in the burbs, chase dysfunction west, we call it.
I was speaking, and it's probably the closest I came to a gospel message. And I kept looking out and I saw my buddy Dean from next door sitting at the doorway. And he'd creep in, he was sitting right in the middle of the doorway. I'm thinking, this is great. Let's look at this guy, you're drawing people to yourself. Like, Dean's there, and I waited the whole time. And finally I finished and everyone was eating, and I came back and I watched somebody attend to him during the service. And I thought, wasn't that great? Dean leaning in, hearing the good gospel message. And he just came over to borrow a shovel because his cat died. Like, that was it. And I was like, don't see that every day. But he felt that comfortable, like he came here because he knew that I could get him a shovel and I had a piece of property that he could bury his cat. So, but yeah, it's, not your everyday Sunday morning usherly duty to go get the pointy shovel to bury Felix.
I ultimately don't believe that you can franchise. You can't brand a community. There's things that other communities can learn from what we do. There's things that we can learn from what other communities do. In fact, Spirit Garage, Minneapolis, the kind of the Lutheran recapitulation of the great tradition, we learned a ton from their experience when we were first doing our explorations. But it wouldn't have made any sense to kind of simulcast from Minneapolis into here and get us all watching it on a screen or a jumbotron, because what they do and what we do, and I think what church communities are called to do, is to gather and to make themselves available to what God is doing?
Well, this is our Agora community garden. It's called Fuller Lawns, which basically is the name of our garden because we're on Fuller Terrace, and had a passion for urban farming, so to speak, and built these plots with a number of the church members and also some people from the local community. And it was really created as a place where people could learn about gardening, connect over gardening, and I think it aspires to be a beautiful part of our community and also add to the sustainability of our community.
When we gather for communion on Sundays, which we do every Sunday, by the way, and we worship and so on, that's really important, potent stuff, and it's certainly at the center of who we are as followers of Jesus. And it's at the center of our community, even in some mysterious way for those people who never attended. But it's not what we would consider to be the sum total of our lives together as a church. What we would say is that everything that we do is church. When we have a drop-in and there's 120 people who are sharing a meal, and sometimes there's a fight breaking out, or there's people trying to sell drugs in the washroom, this also is church. This is the church being the church. When we sit down and we share a meal and communion with each other and have this moment where we can actually connect. When people seek the help of our nurses in the health clinic, and they sit there and they discover that this enclosed little room is a safe place, and they can begin to uncover not only the damage done to their feet or to their legs or to some other wound, but they can begin to uncover the damage that's been done to their souls and confess, in effect, to our nurses what's going on in their lives. This is a deep spiritual moment.
Because we're the kind of community we are, we pick up people's baggage really quick. If somebody's not doing well, we can jump on it. We had a guy a couple of months ago who decided he had a relationship problem with our worship leader, and he just disappeared one day, and we heard through the grapevine, because we're a community, we heard he wasn't coming back. He was leaving. And so I'm able to call him up and have coffee with him and say, look, our community is very easy to get into. It's really difficult to leave because you don't walk out on your family. And we're family, And when it was over, the guy just looked at me and went, you know what, I didn't think anybody cared, I'm like, dude, I received like 5 or 6 phone calls and a couple of emails about the fact that you might not come back. Like, you're loved here. It isn't pretty. It's messy. We laugh together. We cry together. We get mad and yell at each other and have really tough times. But in the end, it's about our family. It's about our community.
Our pastoral care primarily happens outside this building. Primarily it happens on the street, in hostels, in rooming houses, in jails, in hospitals. That's where our pastoral care takes place. Because we need to be where our people are, just like Jesus was where his people were.